What up, guys? Just Joachim here of Joachim the Convert, Joachim Justin Morgan, and I had mentioned several times recently about doing some comparative things about the Eastern and Western Rite portions of the Orthodox Church, the different rites, the different ways of understanding the Orthodox Church, and I began researching that. This will take a while to research before I'll really be able to put out any substantial amount of content or information about comparative comparisons of it. But I did come across this paper that was written by Jack Turner. You can see there they reference University of South Carolina, both of those. And it was submitted to the University of Wales in fulfillment of the requirements for the degree in Doctor of Philosophy. And it does a great job of comparing Western Rite Orthodoxy and the Eastern Orthodox Church. So I wanted to, I've done this before where I kind of read some of these articles, and, you know, it's kind of like an audiobook for academic articles if you're interested in following along. I guess one of the things I wanted to discuss first, though, one of the first videos I want to do on this is what exactly is meant by a rite. I think it's a major oversimplification to discuss rite in terms of simplifying it down to just the liturgy or the Sunday morning liturgy services that you go through, because the rite, the Western Rite, the Eastern Rite is far more encompassing than can be communicated by that. But this article will deal with, I think, mostly some of the liturgical differences between those two, and I'll probably do another video talking about what is entailed in a rite. And this one will cover, I think, the abstract, the introduction, and chapter 1 of this particular article. I like that he starts out here with this quote by St. Augustine of Hippo, and he says, "What then shall we do, since they are Greeks and we are Latins?" This is great quote to begin an article of this type. Just to begin, in the era prior to the Great Schism of 1054, Christianity was one church composed of two culturally distinct elements, the Greek East and Latin West. The Greek and Latin halves of the church each possessed their own independent liturgical and cultural customs, which were part of the dispute that led to the Great Schism, effectively separating the church into independent Greek and Latin sides. While the West had retained liturgical expressions that differed from the majority Western Rite in the form of the Italo-Albanian Catholic Church, which remained in communion with Rome after the official break with Constantinople, the Christian East was exclusively composed of churches celebrating the Byzantine Rite for approximately 900 years. This changed in the latter half of the 19th century when the conversion of Julius Joseph Overbeck to the conversion of Julius Joseph Overbeck to the Russian Orthodox Church in London. Since that time, there have been attempts and success in establishing a Western Rite in the Eastern Church. This thesis approaches Western Rite Orthodoxy in an established phenomenon in Eastern Christianity, especially as a facet of Orthodoxy in countries where Orthodoxy constitutes a minority. While previous short studies have attempted to substantiate or discredit the legitimacy of Western Rite Orthodoxy as a movement, this thesis accepts the reality of the Western Rite and seeks to understand Western Rite Orthodoxy by documenting its history thoroughly, the investigating particularities of the Orthodox Western Rite compared to other Western liturgies, exposing potential problems, spiritual and canonical, of the current rite and devotions when compared to accepted Orthodox theology and spirituality, and by evaluating some of the criticisms which are often employed against Western Rite Orthodoxy. To complete this critical evaluation, there are some important areas of consideration. Though there have been some studies of Western Rite Orthodoxy, there has been little historical documentation of the movement since the middle part of the 20th century. Part of Western Rite Orthodoxy's development has been the alteration of liturgical texts to bring them into conformity with the theology and spirituality of the Eastern Church. There is some question, both in academic and ecclesiastical circles, about how thoroughly these changes were implemented, whether there are still elements requiring further correction, and even if the Western liturgies can be brought into conformity with Eastern theology and practice in any instance. Furthermore, there are ecumenical implications to the presence of Western Rite Orthodoxy that have yet to be addressed, particularly in the Western Rite Orthodox rejection of post-Vatican II liturgies used by the majority of Western Christianity, and the effect this might have on future reunion between a Western Church and Orthodoxy. With this critical framework established, there is a greater opportunity to fully understand Western Rite Orthodoxy in the 20th century, both as it affects the Orthodox Church itself and as it affects external relationships between the Orthodox and other Christian churches. Secondarily, the thesis provides a more complete history in terms of documentation and contextualization of Western Rite Orthodoxy than is presently available through any other medium. He acknowledges a variety of different aspects of the church, and he goes over some of the terms. Antiochian Western Rite version, Antiochian Western Rite Vicariate, from the ROCOR Western Rite. I think he says he thanks Aristobule Ari Adams, who I follow myself on Facebook and have interacted with. He's very friendly and very willing to talk to anyone about the Western Rite, and being a ROCOR Western Rite priest. I think all of the ROCOR churches follow the Sauron Rite, which will be the majority of the videos that I do will focus on the Sauron Rite, as it is the native rite to the British Isles. Actually, his name, Father Aristobule was the first missionary after Joseph of Arimathea to come to the British Isles. So Joseph of Arimathea came with a party first and set up some small communities that didn't really have time to grow before he passed away. And then Saint Aristobule came shortly after that, and he continued that work and really took up and did the first major missionary efforts to the people in the British Isles. So the author continues here with his preface. My interest in Western Rite Orthodoxy came to me in a rather unusual manner. Having not been raised Orthodox or Roman Catholic, I had little idea of what the Western Rite was as an undergraduate. He talks about the same relationship that many people from America at least have, where they weren't exactly Catholic, so they didn't really have a ton of information about the Orthodox Church more widely, and they didn't really have they knew very little about Western rites of Christianity, and they also knew almost nothing about Orthodoxy more widely either. So he talks a lot about that going through here. This is worth reading. I'll post a link to it, and I'll pick it up here, though I don't want to read the entire thing. However, circumstances made the choice of Western Rite Orthodoxy seem natural with the selection of a supervisor in Andreas Andreopoulos and preparing my paperwork for admission to the University of Wales. I know that Father Aristobule, he also did some studies at the University of Wales also, which is obviously in the British Isles. Wales is the southernmost country. Not southern, the westernmost country of the main island. So England and Wales share the same portion of the island. So it looks like he finished this on August 6th on the Feast of Transfiguration. I believe it was in 2010. You can see I'm on page 10 of the PDF, and it gives a breakdown of the pages. Chapter 1 begins as page 1, and I will begin reading there. There's a list of abbreviations. I probably will not remember all these unless they stand out as being immediately obvious. So these are good to be aware of. St. Andrew's Service book. A lot of people within the Western Rite definitely know that the books provided there well. It is one of the major ones. But Chapter 1, Introduction. Western Rite Orthodoxy is most simply understood as those communities or parishes who, through sharing doctrinal unity with other Orthodox churches, do not use the Byzantine liturgies, but use one or more revisions of Western liturgies. As the name might also suggest, Western Rite Orthodoxy is primarily a Western phenomenon, something which is found predominantly in places where the population is Christian, but not specifically Orthodox. Though Western Rite Orthodoxy's origins are in England during the middle of the 19th century, it has been most successful in North America, where it is a small but unseen component of the Antiochian Archdiocese of North America. There have also Western Rite communities in France, and there are small numbers of Western Rite Orthodox in Australia and New Zealand. In its present form, Western Rite Orthodoxy owes much to debates in the 20th century over liturgical revision, especially after Vatican II, and subsequent conflicts over women's ordination and same-gender marriage in churches of the Anglican tradition. But it has also been profoundly influenced historically by questions of how the Western Church relates to Eastern Christianity. The validity of 1979 American Book of Common Prayer among some Episcopalians, and more generally the theological developments of the West in the absence of alternative perspectives from Eastern Christianity following the Schism of 1054. Western Rite literature. I will note he mentioned the Antiochian Orthodox Archdiocese. I know both they and the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia have large Western Rite communities active in the United States. Maybe that wasn't as much the case in 2010, I'm not sure, but I know Rokor is also a major one currently at the timing of this video in 2022. A commonly repeated maximum among Western Rite Orthodox is that the best kept secret in the West is the Orthodox Church, and Western Rite Orthodoxy is the best kept secret in the Orthodox Church. And to a certain extent, such a statement is true, particularly with regards to the scholarly study of Western Rite Orthodoxy. Within journals, the literature on Western Rite Orthodoxy is scant, or at the very least, it's obscure and therefore difficult to find without a significant amount of personal investment in the process of digging it up. However, like many oft-repeated adages, while there is a superficial level of truth, the truth is indeed much deeper. There is in fact a wide dearth of written material on the Western Rite, certainly not all of it equal quality. Some of it only provides insight into the phenomenon of Western Rite Orthodoxy by allowing a researcher to look into how the Western Rite Orthodox see themselves, but is not a fully vetted, peer-reviewed article. At the very least, the primary literature is there, provided one realizes that one is looking for and where to find it. One must be prepared for the challenge of forging ahead into new territory to research the Western Rite, and this means knowing where to begin looking for what has already been said on the subject. Surprisingly, there are a number of articles that are either directly related to Western Rite Orthodoxy or of significant benefit to the study itself. Some of these articles are indirectly related, but their value becomes more apparent as the questions which surround Western Rite Orthodoxy come into stark relief. These include materials addressing subjects as diverse as ecclesiological differences between the East and West, conceptions of the sacraments, the liturgical change renewal in the Western Church, to name just a few. There are several classic studies which must be consulted in the course of any research into Western Rite Orthodoxy, notably the exchange between Paul Schnierla and Alexander Schmemann, and the Western Rite debate between Andrew Sopko and Schmemann. More recently, the Antiochian Western Rite Vicariate Eucharistic liturgies have been subject to scrutiny in a peer-reviewed context, and in both articles, they were judged against the Neo-Gallican Rite of the, I'm not sure about this one, ECOF, with one receiving a brief comment from Paul, I think Eastern, on the ECOF, I think F stands for France, with one receiving a brief comment from Paul Schnierla. The most recent works include a brief overview of the main English language secondary literature and a study of the epiclesis text within the Gregorian liturgy. These articles appeared in a single journal series, so they are relatively easy to locate. In addition, the recent literature review is especially helpful since it covers all the important English language literature up to 2009. There are also a few master's level theses that cover the Western Rite liturgy or focus on one aspect of Western Rite history. One item which should be mentioned is a brief survey of Western Rite Orthodoxy with emphasis on the history of the Western Rite outside the Antiochian Western Rite Vicariate, but notable for its reprint of Overbeck's Mass. Finally, there are two non-English treatments of Western Rite Orthodoxy which should not be overlooked, one detailing the history of the ECOF and another providing an in-depth study of Julian Joseph Overbeck. More problematic is the primary publishing arm of the Antiochian Western Rite Vicariate, St. Luke's Priory Press, lacks a presence in electronic media, or, at the timing of this writing, an appreciable printage catalog. During the latter half of 2007, the press itself was moved from New Jersey to Spokane, Washington, and taken under the supervision of Father Bernard Kinnick of St. Nicholas Orthodox Church, though without any staff other than the parish pastor. As a result, it has been exceptionally difficult to know precisely what material is available and how one can acquire it. In addition to the official publishing arm, Lancelot Andrews Press offers some material which is of interest to Western Rite Orthodoxy, notably an annual calendar with appropriate commemorations. However, the majority of the work of the press is promoting Anglo-Catholic liturgical text, which can make the acquisition of primary documents, particularly liturgical items of historic interest, significantly more difficult. The primary liturgical texts are the SASB, TOM, and TOR. Some of those are referring to Orthodox Mass, Orthodox Rite. I don't remember what the T stands for. These abbreviations get kind of crazy, but the SASB is available through commercial and Orthodox booksellers. TOM and TOR are both available through St. Luke's Priory Press and are not to be found in any library collections. The same holds true for the Rocor's St. Coleman Prayer Book, which is not available to anyone outside the Rocor's Western Rite parishes and monasteries. And I am going to break off the video there. I will pick it up in a second part. Just a few concluding statements to say that some of this information is still available and is still true, and some of it is starting to become somewhat outdated. I think, I don't know about the St. Luke's Priory Press, but most of these things that I see are still available, and the author at the end of this will compare all of these liturgies against one another, but he does not compare them against any Eastern liturgies, so it becomes very difficult, I think, to compare Western and Eastern liturgies and how they stand against one another. Theologically, I know of the ones that I've read through like the Rocor site and studying out the Saurum Rite. I think theologically they don't discredit one another. They don't, I don't really see exactly where they disagree with each other yet of what I've searched, but they're coming from different perspectives. They're wording things differently. Culturally, they are, I think, expressing many of the same things through a different lens. And we see that in the Gospels. The Gospels themselves speak through different lenses, the four Gospel writers. So it shouldn't be a strange thing that the liturgies coming from different cultures express things differently, while also theologically making the same claims. And hopefully that continues to be true. But I will pick this up in another video where I continue reading from this article. You guys take it easy, and I will talk to you soon.